Lovely morning to all the doctors. We are live from Hall Here. To get the session started, I request the panelists to switch on the camera and unmute themselves. Starting with Dr. Amit Kumar Deb, Dr. Akshay Agnihotri, Dr. Chittaranjan Mishra, Dr. Piyush Kohli, and Dr. Obli Ramachandran. Over to the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, madam, for the brief introduction. So I'll just give a brief overview of our course. So I'll just go to my slide sharing mode. Good morning, everyone. So at the outset, I would like to thank AIOS Scientific Committee for giving us this opportunity to present this instruction course on lasers in retinal diseases, an update of the laser techniques, indications, and the newer innovations. So I have with me other co-instructors for the course, Dr. Akshay, Dr. Chittaranjan, Dr. Piyush, and Dr. Obli. So I welcome you all. So I also welcome all the other panelists and the attendees. So I'll just give a brief overview of the course, what we're going to discuss today. So first it will be by Dr. Akshay, introduction to the lasers, history and mechanisms of laser. Then myself, I will be speaking on lasers in PDR, diabetic macular edema, in retinal vein occlusions, NVG, and vasculitis. Dr. Chittaranjan will have a topic on lasers in CSCR, barrage laser, ROP laser, and he'll also try to cover a bit of lasers in ocular tumors. Then Dr. Piyush will take over and discuss the newer laser techniques, that is the Pascal laser, micropulse laser, Nevilas, targeted retinal photocoagulation, nanopulse laser. And finally, Dr. Oboli will discuss a step-by-step guide for a beginner, how to do a laser as a beginner and what are the possible complications and management. So all these topics, as you can see, there might be slight overlap of few headings or few slides. So those will be the slides which you want to emphasize on, and most important points which you want to emphasize on. There might be slight overlap of the topics between the speakers. So with this brief introduction, I forward to Dr. Akshay for introduction to lasers, the history and mechanism. Dr. Akshay, you can share your slides.
Good morning, everybody. Are my slides visible?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. So, welcome to IC 55 at High Hall, AIOC 2021. This is sharp 8:30 in the morning. We are starting our instruction course. Slides are not moving.
Arrow mark से use. Left side.
Center में click कर दीजिए.
Okay. So I don't have any financial disclosure. And at the outset, I would thank Scientific Committee AIOS for giving us this opportunity to present our instruction course in front of our audience. So my topic is Introduction to Lasers, History and Mechanisms. I'll just give a brief introduction about the history, how the lasers have evolved over a period of time since the 1930s and 1940s, and how lasers work, specifically PRP laser in retinal diseases. So we've all heard about laser. Laser is an acronym, as we all know. It stands for light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. But then what is maser? So maser is microwave amplification by emission of radiation. So the idea of laser was derived from maser. And the person who invented maser also got a Nobel Physics Prize for the development of masers. And then later on, we started developing further technologies like laser, which we use in ophthalmology diseases nowadays. So these three gentlemen contributed a lot to the development of lasers. The one on the right with his tongue out, as we all know, is Albert Einstein. He predicted that light waves can be amplified. And these light waves can be amplified to, he predicted this way back in 1917. The gentleman on the left is Dr. Meyer Schwickerath. He is He's the one who invented the first laser, along with the gentleman on the right side bottom corner. He's Mr. Hans Littmann. He was a physicist at Carl Zeiss. So these three are important people in the development and history of lasers. And Meyer Schuckerath is a German ophthalmologist who invented the first laser which was used clinically. So where did he get his idea from? So he was inspired by a solar eclipse. In around 1945, a lot of patients started visiting Dr. Schuckerath after viewing a solar eclipse. And when he examined their fundus, he noticed that they all had some macular lesions and some lesions on the retina, which we now know as photic retinopathy. So he realized that sunlight can be harnessed using lenses and to photocoagulate retinas in case of certain diseases. So he started taking patients of melanoma to the roof of his clinic and tried to harness sun and photocoagulate the retinas. But he realized that this had a lot of problems. The sunlight was not predictable. It was very inconsistent. Also, because of the constant motion of the earth and the sun, he could not give consistent and deliverable results constantly. So he started working with Littmann at Carl Zeiss. And he developed the first xenon arc photocoagulator in 1956, which became commercially available in 1958. This was the first laser which was developed for retinal diseases. So this is a picture of that retinal. It was a huge machine, actually very bulky machine. And this was what he used for delivering lasers. But these xenon lamps, they had their limitations. The spot size of these lamps were very large. It was very difficult to focus, and this was polychromatic light. So it faced a lot of difficulty, and it was difficult for a clinical practice to maintain such a machine because of the large size and the intense burns of xenon. And these burns used to cause some vitreoretinal traction because of the intensity of the burns. Also, the xenon lamps had poor collimation. The direction of the laser was not as good as the lenses which came out in the future. So along the same time, Maiman developed a ruby crystal laser in 1960, and argon blue laser was developed in 1965. Now, when these lasers were developed, there was the famous diabetic retinopathy study, which showed that lasers decrease severe vision loss in diabetic retinopathy. So in this study, xenon versus argon laser was also compared, and they realized that both these lasers decrease severe vision loss in diabetic retinopathy, but the VR traction effects which were seen with xenon, these were not seen in argon laser, and then hence argon lasers became much widely used compared to xenon. But these were all gas-based lasers. These were bulky and water-cooled. And these lasers had fragile gas tubes, so they were difficult to maintain at a clinical practice. So around this same time, L. Aspran started conducting studies on Nd:YAG and krypton laser. And nowadays, the commonly used lasers are green laser 530 nanometer, which we use routinely, which is frequency doubled Nd:YAG laser, the yellow laser, and the infrared diode laser. These three lasers are the ones which we use commonly nowadays. So now, if we talk about further advancements, there is a separate topic which Dr. Piyush Kohli will discuss, but I'll just mention them. They are pattern laser, which is Pascal or Iridex machines. Then there is micropulse laser, and there is a Navilas laser, which is the only slit lamp based laser. So now I move on to mechanism of laser. So laser, there has to be some properties of light or properties of laser which make it very useful to treat retinal diseases. So these three properties make it very useful. One is that monochromaticity, which means that there is a single wavelength. All these particles of laser are in phase, so the energy delivered can be very consistent, and the laser light are collimated, which means they are parallel and they maintain the same direction. So the power can be titrated accordingly. These three properties make laser very, very useful for use in precise delivery of laser inside the eye. And as we know, that eye is one of the main organs in the body where laser is used extensively. So now we go to the mechanism, how laser PRP works in the retina. So retina has dual circulation with a watershed zone. Majority of oxygen supplied to the choriocapillaris by the choriocapillaris is to the outer retina. This oxygen does not reach the inner retina usually. So inner retina, which is supplied by the central retinal artery, And in this diagrammatic representation, we can see the diffusion of blood by the choriocapillaris in the outer layers. So what happens in ischemic disease like diabetic retinopathy or vein occlusions or even ROP is that there is a lot of non-perfusion of the retina, which causes hypoxia and CNP areas. And so these CNP areas release some angiogenic factors like VEGF. So when these VEGFs are released, there is a formation of neovascular tissue. This neovascular tissue has a tendency to bleed and cause vitreous hemorrhage and other tractional complications, which we see in ischemic diseases. These usually form at the junction of perfused and non-perfused retina. So when we do a laser, this laser gets absorbed by pigments, which is melanin in the RP and hemoglobin in the blood. It causes thermal coagulation. Usually there is heat generation at the RP level, and at any duration of laser above 200 milliseconds, this spreads to above 100 milliseconds, this spreads about to the photoreceptors and destroys them, causing a thermal coagulation and glial cell formation. These photoreceptors get destroyed at higher temperatures, and there is also constriction of vessels. So this, when we put a thermal burn, we can always see the burn expanding, which is called thermal blooming. So this thermal blooming effect is because of the increased duration which we give in a single spot laser above 100 millisecond duration, which is prevented in the newer lasers. So now, once we have destroyed the outer retina, the oxygen from the choriocapillaris can reach the inner retina. It improves the oxygen tension and improves hypoxia. And so the demand supply mismatch which had happened because of the ischemic disease process gets resolved. So the newer lasers, which I'll just mention briefly, are the pattern laser. Now these are shorter pulse lasers. The duration of these lasers is only 20 to 30 milliseconds. So they give less energy, less chorioretinal scarring. The burn does not bloom. And they also have certain beneficial effects compared to regular lasers. I'll just mention the next two. One is micropulse. These are the only lasers which you can give at the macula. So rest of the lasers, you usually avoid the macular area, but this laser you can paint over the macula, because these are short pulses of energy with only a duty cycle of 5, 10 to 15%, the details of which Dr. Piyush Kohli will explain later. And these avoid thermal damage and lateral spread. They spare the photoreceptors. The thing is, they don't have any visible endpoint, and these lasers can be repeated multiple times. And just to complete, the Navilas is the latest laser, which is the only fundus camera based laser. The physician has to import images from his fundus fluorescein angiogram and infrared images. He can mark the optic nerve head and fovea, and this machine has eye tracking technology, so it does not hit the fovea if the patient moves his eye. And this is my presentation for the day. Thank you. I would like Amit sir to carry on the instruction course.
Thank you, Dr. Akshay. A very detailed presentation on the history of lasers and the mechanism of lasers. So moving on to our next topic, we have a topic to be presented by myself. So I'll be talking on lasers in PDR and diabetic macular edema, and I'll also touch upon lasers in RVOs and neovascular glaucoma and vasculitis. I have no financial disclosures. So as Dr. Akshay had already mentioned, the commonly used lasers nowadays are the three types of lasers. The green laser, we have different brands of machines for green laser. Then we have the red laser, which is 810 nanometers. And we have the yellow laser, which is 577 nanometers. So coming to the laser delivery modes, the most commonly used delivery mode is slit lamp delivery mode, which is commonly used in the OPDs. And then we have the indirect ophthalmoscope delivery mode. Then we have the endoprobe mode, where we do the laser during vitreoretinal surgery. Next, you should know something about the lenses which are used for panretinal photocoagulation. So there is a wide variety of lenses available. However, if anyone as a beginner wants to start doing lasers, retinal lasers and PRP, the Mainstar PRP 165 lens and the Volk Superquad 160 lens, these are the two lenses which give a good balance between the magnification and the field of view. So these are the two lenses which we commonly prefer in our day-to-day laser practice. Also coming to focal laser lens, Mainstar focal lens is the one which is being commonly used. Also we have Volk area centralis. Next, the grading of laser. So there are 4 grades of laser: grade 1, 2, 3, 4. For PRP, we opt for grade 3, and for macular lasers like focal and grid laser, we opt for grade 1. So grade 4 is the one which you should try to avoid, and it can lead to retinal hemorrhages and also can lead to retinal breaks. So what are the factors affecting retinal photocoagulation? So this you should remember while doing the lasers. There might be some amount of scattering if there are cortical cataracts, so that might hamper the laser delivery or laser uptake by the retina. Again, as Dr. Akshay had mentioned, laser is being first absorbed by the RPE melanin, the RPE pigments. So in a hypopigmented fundus, the amount of laser energy needed might be slightly higher than a hyperpigmented or normally pigmented retina. So this we should keep in mind when we are doing a laser. We should have a idea what is the grade of pigmentation. So for hypopigmented patients, we might need to use higher powers. Then spot size is inversely proportional to the burn intensity. Then power is again directly proportional to the burn intensity, and we have exposure time, which is also directly proportional to the intensity of the burn. So what are the indications of lasers in PDR? It's high risk PDR and early PDR in one-eye patients. This is the textbook indications, but in practice, even in early PDR patients, we do the PRP. So important thing we should remember here is the settings which are used for PRP. So number of sittings we do PRP is usually 2 to 3 sittings. However, you should remember patients with tendency for fluid retention, mostly the nephropathy patients, we should use more sittings. 4 or more sittings we can use, because if you give more number of laser spots in a particular sitting, they might lead, it might lead to exudation in the retina. So that should be avoided. Now coming to the spot size used for PRP, it's 200 microns is the one which we use regularly. Then power can be titrated from 100 to 400 milliwatts. Again, it depends on the media clarity and the pigmentation of the retina. Duration for each laser spot for a single spot laser you use is 150 to 200 milliseconds. And interval, this is the interval option, that is the time period between the two laser spots if we keep the foot pedal pressed continuously. So for beginners, it's better to keep this interval as off. So with some expertise, we can switch on the interval. For beginners, it is better to press the foot pedal each time for each spot. Then once we have gained some expertise in doing the laser, we can switch on the interval mode and keep it around 200 to 500 milliseconds based on our skill. And the spacing will be one burn with effort. So to summarize, we have settings of PRP around 3 sittings, 800 to 1000 spots we prefer in each sitting, 150 millisecond duration for each laser spot, 200 micron will be the spot size on the slit lamp or on the display panel, and 150 to 200 milliwatts is the average power used for laser, and it might be titrated higher if needed. So coming to the laser parameters again, as you can see here, it's a this machine has both single and multi-spot laser. The moment we press the single spot mode, we can see the pulse duration and the power are 200. So this can be titrated to 150. Now, again, the moment we press the multi-spot mode, you can see the duration is automatically reduced to 20 milliseconds. So this is very important. For multi-spot laser, the duration is 20 to 40 milliseconds. One more thing we should keep in mind is during doing laser, this spot diameter which is fixed on the slit lamp. So if you do, usually we'll fix it at 200. For focal or grid laser, we'll keep it at 100. So if you don't adjust this spot size, suppose it is at 300 or 400, then the amount of energy we might need might be more. Again, the magnification in the slit lamp, usually prefer the lower magnifications, which gives a good field of view of the retina. Around 8 magnification or 5 also we can use. So what is the extent of doing laser? So anteriorly we go to the equator or slightly beyond, posteriorly around the macula, 2 disc diameter away from the center of the macula, that is the fovea on all sides. So roughly around the margin of the arcades above and below, and around the optic disc 1 disc diameter above, below and nasal. And if add PRP is needed or additional PRP, you can come as close as half disc diameter. One thing important you should remember is if there are any tractional bands or fibrovascular proliferation seen, you should stay 2 disc diameter away from those. One more important thing for the beginners is you can see this is a right eye image. There's some vitreous hemorrhage. So this is how you see the patient's fundus in a photograph. The moment you put the lenses for laser, the image will be like this. So it will be laterally reversed and also inverted. So this, the inferior retina becomes the superior. So this is very important for the beginners. So right eye of the patient, the macula will be seen on the nasal side of the patient once we put the laser lenses. So to avoid any confusion during the lasers, we can have a pre-drawn fundus chart or a photograph in our mobile phone and turn it upside down and then keep it in front of you. And then any confusion during doing laser about the quadrants, you can always have a look at the chart in front of you or the mobile phone and then continue your laser. So idea of this is to avoid any burns in the macular area. So inferior quadrant, we do the lasers first and temporal retina last. And in case of any vitreous hemorrhage, we should give accessible PRP, and additional PRP you can give between previous laser marks or beyond the equator. So this case, you can see a laser has been done in the periphery, but there are small areas. There is some vitreous hemorrhage here, gaps here. So this has to be filled up. So you have to come closer to the arcade. So again, this case, pre-retinal hemorrhages, and then you can see some laser marks. So again, close to the arcade, there are lots of gaps. So those areas can be filled up. Here you can see one new vessel. So we don't directly laser on the new vessel. So accessible PRP, if there is VH or PRH, whichever areas of the retina are visible, we have to do the laser, and subsequently as the VH clear, we have to fill up those quadrants. Now, how to tackle a hazy media? If the patient is having cataract, we can increase the power and gradually titrate up to 800 to 1000 milliwatts. Next option we can do is reduce the spot size to 100 micron in the slit lamp and increase the laser duration to around 200 milliseconds, or you can go for LIO, or you can do initiate PRP and do whatever PRP is possible through the hazy cataract. You can do the cataract surgery and complete the PRP after surgery. Usually, if you are doing indirect ophthalmoscopy or non-contact procedure, laser after cataract surgery, you can start after 1 week to 10 days. If you are doing any contact lens, then you have to wait for 1 month after the surgery. So similarly, in a dispersed VH, we can do accessible PRP, and we can have an ask the patient to maintain head and elevation. LIO can be used, and you complete the laser in 5 to 6 sittings, and then you can keep the patient for close follow-up. So in follow-up, what do you see is good response to PRP means regressing NVs, resolving VH or disc failure, and we follow up the patient every 3 to 6 months with good systemic control. Inadequate response means new NVs are there, non-resolving VH, and new VH despite previous laser. So these patients will need additional PRP, good systemic control. We can try anti-VEGFs in this patient. And finally, if it is a non-resolving VH, you have to go for vitrectomy. So LIO, just a short one slide, it is preferred in immediate post-op patients, in patients with dispersed VH and dense cataract. Settings will be again 1000 spots per sitting, 150 millisecond duration, around 200 milliwatts power, and we don't have any spot size adjustment for LIO. So coming to lasers in DME, we have two different types of lasers in DME, focal laser and grid laser. Focal laser, we directly hit the leaking microaneurysms, and grid lasers, we try to improve the malfunctioning RP pump, that is the outer blood retinal barrier. Again, here you have to remember the spot size, you have to keep between 50 to 100, and the duration from 50 to 100 milliseconds, and also the power between 50 to 100 milliseconds. Now coming to grid laser, previously the conventional grid was used where the C-shaped grid laser pattern was given in both the edematous as well as non-edematous retina. The settings are almost same as a focal laser. However, nowadays we have another type called the modified grid photocoagulation, which is commonly used. In this, we directly photocoagulate the visible microaneurysms, and the grid pattern is given only to the leaking edematous retina. The normal area of the retina and the macula is spared. Coming to sectoral laser in BRVO, the indications will be any patient with NV or NVD or VH. They apply to the sector of retinal capillary closure. So one shot with a part similar to PRP, and around 500 spots are required in each setting. So in retinal ischemia in BRVO, if it is more than 5 disc diameters, they have a chance of 36% chance of developing NV or NVD, and 60 to 90% chance of developing VH. So if laser photocoagulation is not performed, so VVO study has shown this laser can reduce the risk of vitreous hemorrhage from 60 to 30%. Also, it reduces the risk of neovascular glaucoma in patients with NVI. Coming to CRVO, again, there is no role for prophylactic PRP in CRVO, as studies have shown. The central vein occlusion study has shown. So there is also no role for grid laser for cystoid macular edema in CRVO. So PRPs can be given only after NV or NVI, and rarely if NV or NVD develops. The pattern is similar to PRP in diabetes. However, these patients will need close follow-up. Next, we have vasculitis. In vasculitis, you can see a lot of capillary non-perfusion areas and new vessels in the peripheral retina. So all those areas you have to identify and apply laser to the peripheral retina wherever there are capillary non-perfusion areas. But one caution, you should remember that as you are doing laser in the peripheral retina, the retina is thin there, so the laser energy should be reduced. So next is the neovascular glaucoma. We have many challenges in neovascular glaucoma like hazy media, occurs because of corneal edema, hyphema or VH. In corneal edema, you can scrape the epithelium and try the PRP, and you can use a BCL after that. And these patients also have poor mydriasis. So this is a case of ocular ischemic syndrome with neovascular glaucoma. So one important thing you should remember is in neovascular glaucoma, we should try to finish the laser as early as possible. And 2 sittings of PRP, we try to finish in 5 days apart. You can add anti-VEGF injections also in these patients. So last 2 slides, the complications of lasers. This will be touched upon, discussed in details by Dr. Ovoli. I just mentioned the important side effects. All patients will have some amount of macular edema after laser. So these patients should be treated with NSAIDs. There can be exudative RD if you give excessive laser and inadvertent foveal burns. So this is one patient who had PRP of around 300 spots, and he has a nephropathy patient, and he developed massive exudation after PRP, and then patient had to be started on steroids, and after 1 week of steroids, only this patient had the recovery of his vision. So these things you should keep in mind. So to summarize, for PRP, we have 200 micron setting and 150 milliseconds of duration, the power around 200 milliwatts and 800 spots. For focal laser, the settings is between 50 to 100. So one caution in nephropathy patients, you should maintain the blood urea and creatinine values are must before doing laser. So inferior quadrant, you will do laser first, and topical NSAIDs can be given to the patients after the laser. And if you are doing a laser, it's better to avoid intravitreal injections on the same day. And if you have given any intravitreal injections, we try to avoid laser for a week. Thank you for your patient listening. With this, we'll move on to the next topic for the day. So I welcome Dr. Chittaranjan for his topic on lasers in CSCR, barrage laser, ROP laser, and lasers in ocular tumors. Over to you, Dr. Chittaranjan.
Yes. Are my slides visible?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you, AIOS. Thank you, Dr. Amit. I have been allotted a heterogeneous group of diseases, lasers in CSR, barrage laser, ROP laser, and lasers in ocular tumors. No financial interest. Coming to first, the lasers in CSR. CSR is fairly a common disease diagnosed in our retina clinics. Can you see the annotation here, Dr. Amit? Can you see the annotation?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So the proposed pathophysiology is some form of RP lesion which causes the accumulation of fluid in the sub-RP or subretinal area. Okay. So the indications of laser in CSR traditionally known as non-resolution of the SRF in 3 to 4 months, recurrent CSR, fellow eye CSR, chronic CSR with DRP, diffuse retinal pigment epitheliopathy, or the occupational or professional needs of the patient. So we know traditionally there are ink blood leakage and smokestack leakage. You can see over here, this is the clinical photo. This is the early frame of the FFA. So what I try to impress upon here is we should not miss the early frame of the FFA. This is the ink blood leakage and this is the smokestack leakage. So coming to the current laser machines available for focal laser, we have double frequency Nd:YAG laser 532, we have subthreshold micropulse 577 and subthreshold micropulse diode 810 nanometer. Lenses used, we use a focal lens, Menster or focal lens. The grade of the burn, we should aim for a grade 1 or grade 2 burn. As we can see over here, some people directly hit over the leak or some people hit it in a flower petal pattern as I have shown it over here. So we should aim for a grade 1 to 2 burn. Coming to a clinical example, this here we can see this is a bilateral CSR case. Here we can see the leakage is there and some form of window defects are also there. In the upper panel, we can see the pre-laser OCT where you can see the SRF and the PED is also there. And after 3 months of the focal laser, you can see nicely there is resolution of the lesions. However, sometimes we need the repeat focal laser also. Here you can see after the first focal laser was done, there was resolution of the SRF, but it was not complete healing. The patient needed a second focal laser, after 3 months of which there was complete resolution of the SRF with some form of RP lesions. There is subthreshold micropulse yellow laser, which is now gaining popularity among the retinologists. And this is invisible reaction subthreshold. Subthreshold means it's invisible, it's not visible, but it is sufficient to produce an RP effect, which is confined to photothermal effect only. Here you can see some of the clinical examples. This is from TNOA journal. I have taken this photo, especially for the subfoveal leaks. So traditional focal lasers we can do for the lesions, for the leak if it is more than 375 micron from the center of the fovea. However, if it is subfoveal, subthreshold micropulse cello laser is more preferable. Another thing, another indication is your chronic CSR. Chronic CSR cases, we can do subthreshold micropulse cello laser. This is one image from seminars in ophthalmology from our Arvind group. Here we can see post laser, there is good resolution of the subretinal fluid. Another concept is your subthreshold TTT for CSR. Here it's 810 nanometer, size is 0.5 micron, 0.5 mm, and we can see this is long pulse duration. Long pulse means around 1 minute. Power is 100 milliwatt around, and you have to titrate it accordingly. You have to give a sub-threshold, give a test one first, then decrease it by 10% or 30 to 40% according to different literature. Dr. Shukla et al., they are having the largest series of TTT for CSR. This is one of the images from their paper, where you can see there is resolution of the lesion post sub-threshold TTT. Then PTT for CSR with different permutation and combination of low fluence, high fluence, and other different combinations. It has been tried. Special situations like chronic CSR or subthreshold CSR, it actually helps. This is a case of DRP, where subfoveal smokestack leak we can see over here. And post low fluence PDT, you can see there is nice resolution of the SRF. So coming to the summary of lasers in CSR, so consider the indications, locate the leakage sites in the early frame of the FFA, and it should be a recent FFA. Monitor for the CNVM development in the site of laser, and in special situations you have to consider other treatment modality like PDT, TTT, or micropulse yellow laser, subthreshold yellow laser. Coming to my second topic, that is barrage laser. The absolute indication for barrage of any peripheral lesion is symptomatic retinal hole. You can see over here, symptomatic retinal hole. Rest of the things what are discussed in our WAT rounds or for the comprehensive ophthalmologists are relative indications. So what is the pathomechanism of a barrage laser? It causes exudative choroiditis, which ultimately gives to adhesive choroidal scarring. So for a posterior or equatorial break, you have to give 2 to 3 rows of buns, which should not be overlapping, just overlapping. And you should not hit directly over the margin of the break or the operculum or the vitreous nearby. So you can get a nice scarring post laser. And for the anterior breaks, you can use Goldman 3-mirror lens or LIO with scleral indentation. Here also avoid the operculum and the vitreous traction, and you must connect to the ora. So coming to the barrage of a lattice, you can see over here, we should keep one distance of around 0.5 to 1 dd from the margin of the lattice. We should not encroach on the lattice itself. If multiple lattices are there, we have to connect the lattices. However, some cautions should be followed. For example, like this case, we should not do a grade 4 bun. We should not hit directly on the lattice, and we should not give very much overlapping buns. We should be cautious about that. While doing a barrage with a peripheral RD, you can see over here, there is the extension of the SRF is there. Here is the break, you can see over here. However, we should not do the barrage only. We should take care of the macula as well. Here you can see the surgeon, he has taken care of the barrage, taken care of the break, but forgot to look at the macula. So we should not do that. There is something called anchoring barrage, especially in cases of PDR or where you can get a traction. The traction can be associated with subretinal fluid. There also you should give the barrage to the attached retina, preferably 1 to 2 dd away from the margin. However, because macula was very much nearby, so we have probably 2 dd is not exactly followed over here. Special situations like doing barrage before LASIK, aggressive laser versus conventional laser, there are 2 schools of thought. Like some people tell that we should follow our regular indications. Some people tell that we should go for aggressive laser. We should follow whatever is practiced in our center, in the respective center where we are trained. Coming to trauma, sometimes you get dialysis. There also to do buccal versus barrage. Break plus or minus vitreous hemorrhage, we should go for barrage or surgery. That should be customized. So coming to the summary of laser barrage, we have to do practice in model A, especially in our beginners for the fellows and all. Pre-laser workup definitely helps, and we should check for the pattern, grade of the bun, and continuity of the bun, and documentation follow-up really helps. Doing laser in ROP is zone 1 any stage with plus, zone 1 stage 3 without plus, zone 2 stage 2 or 3 with plus, and aggressive posterior ROP. So friends, informed consent form is a must because so many MLC medical legal cases are coming. and topical anesthesia is sufficient to do barrage for ROP. Support staff, a good neonatologist clearance, GA standby, general anesthesia standby is needed, and a good assistant actually helps us. So what are the laser machines by which we can deliver? Diode 810 nanometer and Nd:YAG 532 green laser we can do. Here we can see over here, this is the diode machine and this is the Nd:YAG 532 machine. So this is one of the clinical examples, zone 1 stage 2 to 3, flat NB and plus digits both the. You can see over here, the plus digits is there, the tortuous vessels we can see over here, and here we can see the NB and flat NB. These are the flat NB. So after the laser was done, we can see nicely there is regression of the tortuosity of the vessels. The NB, flat NB is regressing. And please mark over here, the laser marks are encroaching directly up to the retina, the avascular and vascular junction of the retina. So this is the post-laser photo. So we should do the follow-up. It's not one-time business. You do one time and just get rid of the disease, because sometimes the skip areas will be there which will need additional treatment. And especially they should be, the baby should be undergoing a refraction, because there is risk of amblyopia always. So coming to the summary of ROP laser, early screening, close follow-up, and never miss any plus, pre-plus, AP-ROP or zone 1 or 2 ROP. And treat such eyes vigorously for the full avascular retina ablation. Coming to the last topic, that is lasers in ocular tumors, we can cover under the headings like retinoblastoma, choroidal hemangioma, choroidal melanoma, and retinal angiomatosis lesion. Lasers in retinoblastoma. With the advent of other modalities of treatment, laser in retinoblastoma is having very limited use nowadays, because previously it was used for the selective lesions like less than 3 mm in diameter, or which are in visually non-crucial areas it were used. However, TTT, transperineal thermotherapy, is a better alternative nowadays. The heat generated through a 810 micron laser through the LIO, through the laser delivery system, is actually effective, and it can achieve complete regression in around 85% of the cases. However, repeat treatment modality, repeat sessions are needed. And sometimes if adjunct to chemotherapy it is used, it is known as chemothermotherapy. So this is one of the examples where you can see this is a group B retinoblastoma. And this is after the first session of TTT, this is after second session, this is after the third session, and this is after the fourth session. You can see nicely regressing lesion. These are in between some of the peripheral lasers were given to this patient. Coming to circumscribed choroidal hemangioma, you can see over here, there is central circumscribed hemangioma. Nothing difficult to diagnose it from B-scan and OCT. Here TTT, unlike the subthreshold in CSR, here we can do the threshold or supra-threshold TTT. Here the spot size will be 3, unlike 0.5 in CSR, and power should be little higher, and long pulse duration is needed. Coming to malignant melanoma of choroid, we can see over here there is very limited role of laser per se for choroid, because we have other different modality like plaque brachytherapy, which is eye sparing, or sometimes enucleation will be needed. Coming to angiomatosis retinae, that is the last subtopic. It's not difficult to diagnose. However, sometimes if you consider on the posterior pole, you may miss the peripheral lesion. So sometimes FFA also helps. As you can see in this lesion, arteries and veins communicating with the lesion, you can see nicely. So here the patient cryo was done, and the laser bunch you can see post surrounding the laser over here. So surrounding the lesions. Summary of the laser of the retinal tumors, less commonly used nowadays, especially useful in angiomatosis retinae and choroidal hemangioma. So thank you, Dr. Amit. This was from me.
Dr. Amit, you are on mute.
Thank you, Dr. Chittaranjan, for your wonderful image and case-based presentation. With this, we will move on to the next topic for the session. That is by Dr. Piyush. I welcome Dr. Piyush for his topic on newer laser techniques. Over to you, Dr. Piyush.
Wait, Amit, I think how to open. Which one is yours? This one, huh? Recent advances.
You can open the PPT first, and then as you have done for yours.
We open the PPT, Amit, then what to do?
Now you go to sharing.
Share screen, okay.
Share screen, and then you click on the PPT. Yes.
Okay, now is it visible?
Yes, it's visible. Welcome, Dr. Piyush.
Good morning, all. First of all, I would like to thank AIOS and Amit sir for giving me this opportunity. So I'll be talking about the new laser techniques in retinal laser. I have no financial interest to disclose. So what are the problems with conventional laser? It causes a collateral damage. The conventional laser, there's a thermal elevation of 20 to 30 degrees Celsius. So the scars expand, there is scotomas, then ectopias. The laser is painful, it is slow speed, and obviously it is inaccurate due to human inaccuracies. So the newer laser techniques that I'll be discussing are the micropulse and the nanopulse laser, which cause less collateral damage. The pattern scanning laser called the Pascal, which is faster. The navigated retinal laser, the Navilas, which reduces the human inaccuracies. And the targeted retinal photocoagulation, which reduces the extent of treatment. So the sub-threshold micropulse laser was invented by Pankratov in 1990. Instead of continuous wave, the laser energy is delivered in short pulses, all the micropulses. The first image is of the conventional laser, where energy is delivered continuously, and there's a high rise of temperature. Whereas in micropulse laser, energy is delivered in small pulses. So during the on period, energy is delivered, while during the on-off period, the tissue is allowed to cool down. So a very important concept in this is a duty cycle. Duty cycle is the percentage of time when the laser is in the on mode. So for example, if we choose a 200 millisecond duration burst and choose a 5% duty cycle, the laser will be delivered for 100 microseconds and there will be an off period for 1900 microseconds. So this is a video of continuous wave laser. A high rise of temperature is seen and there's a scarring noted. On the contrary, in case of micropulse, small pulses are given, the temperature rise is small, there's an off period in between, so there are no scar formation. So coming on to the parameters, always give a test burn. I'll repeat it 2 times. Always give a test burn, and give it nasal to the disc. Titrate the power, give a barely visible burn. The power that you will be expected will be 3 to 4 times compared to the continuous mode, and reduce the power to 30%. For example, if the laser is coming at 1000 microwatts, you reduce the power to 300. So this is the screen of Iridex home screen. This is the place where you have to click to switch on the micropulse. When you click on the micropulse, such a screen will appear. So in this case, the duty cycle is 5% and the duration is 200. So in this case, 100 microseconds will be the energy delivered, and 1900 microseconds, it will be an off period. Similarly, for 10 duty cycle, 200 microseconds, the energy will be delivered, and off period for 1800 microseconds. Be careful that whichever the option you have selected will be in brown. So if you have to select on, it has to be in brown mode, and then you click on OK. So once the micropulse have been switched on, the background goes to yellow. The power will be seen in yellow. Just compare this to the normal screen in which everything will be white. Remember, do not laser on a very high power in a normal mode. Coming on to the review of literature, the high quality evidence of efficacy has been provided for DME. So sub-threshold micropulse laser, diode laser resulted in better visual acuity compared to the conventional laser. It has also been done in BRVO. In BRVO, it is safe and as effective as the conventional laser. However, the treatment of choice is obviously the anti-VEGF injections. So sub-threshold laser can be used in combination with the anti-VEGF injections to improve the enhancement of vision. It has also been tried in chronic CSR. It can be considered as a first line of treatment for chronic CSR, especially in these days when the Visudyne is not available. It can also be used in subfoveal CSCR. So this is an example of CSCR. There are 2 leaks. One is extrafoveal, where you can give the conventional focal laser, but this laser is in the FAZ area. So you cannot do focal laser because it will give to a scotoma. So what your options available is the micropulse laser. So endpoint management is something similar to micropulse laser. Here you will use a 15 to 20 millisecond power pulse duration. So if you decrease the power to 75%, the lesions will not be visible, but the photoreceptor damage can be seen on OCT. If you decrease the power to 50%, lesions are still seen on FFA. But if you decrease the power to 30%, no damage is detected on FFA, OCT, or histology. So this is an example of endpoint management. In this, just visible burns are given at the border of the area treated so that the surgeon remembers the area that he has treated. So nanopulse is still used for research purpose. It uses pulses of 3 nanosecond pulse. It has been used in DME and found that efficacy of the system is in comparison with the conventional argon laser photocoagulation. It has been used in intermediate dry AMD. The drusen area is reduced and there is improvement in flicker threshold. It has also been used in CSR and found that it is effective and safe method for restoration of macular anatomy and sensitivity in acute and chronic CSCR. Coming on to the Pascal, it is a semi-automated system which delivers laser pulses with short duration in a rapid predetermined spot pattern. So the pulses are shorter, the energy delivery is less, the scar expansion is less. So this is an example of comparing the short pulse and the conventional pulse. In the conventional pulse, the expansion is more temporally, it is more anterior-posteriorly. So there is an internal inner retinal damage, there is choroidal damage. Also, as you see in Pascal, the spots are much more organized. So in Pascal, it will require higher number of laser spots, maybe around 3000. So Pascal for PRP is associated with significantly lower levels of headache, photophobia, and pain. Manchester Pascal study was done, which showed that the mean fluence to produce grade 2 and grade 3 burns at 20 millisecond was about 30% lower than at 100 millisecond pulsed laser. So at 100 millisecond laser, there was a greater blood-retinal barrier breakdown. There was more overlapping of the burns. There was increased intraretinal thickening at 4 weeks and greater macular RNFL thinning at 12 weeks. So all these are taken care if we use a 20 millisecond Pascal burn. So the various patterns available in Iridex are a square. You can use a grid of 2 into 2. This can be increased to 7 into 7. Then the spacing can be changed. It can be 1.25. You can decrease it to as much as 0 and increase it as much as to 2 burn width apart. There's a 7 to 7 grid, which will use a 49 points. Then there are other shapes available. The triple arc, where the arc you can change. This is a 45-degree arc, which will give 66 points. It can be increased to 270 or even 360. Then a circle is available if you want to barrage a hole. If it's a bigger hole, you can increase the radius. Then there are other patterns available in TopCon. This, I think, will be covered by Dr. Obli. So if you have a BMW car, you have to be more careful while driving. Similar is with this Pascal also. If you have Pascal, you have to be more careful. If you see it, there are a lot of gap areas. There are areas of overlapping. And as you go interiorly, the burns are much more wide. So as you go interiorly, you have to decrease the power. You have to cover all the gap areas and there should be no overlapping. Coming on to Navilas. So what are the problems with conventional laser? Identifying FFA visible microorganism on live fundus is difficult because it is inversed and vertically inverted. So accidental foveal damage can also happen due to unexpected eye movements. So Navilas is a fundus camera based laser planning system. The no treatment areas are marked with yellow. The area where you have to plan is marked in green. Now this is seen on an infrared size, and then eye tracking is available. So Navilas advantages are it is safe, it is accurate, you can document, and as well as it can be used for teaching. It has been used in PRP, it is faster and less painful. It has been used for DME. In DME, Navilas achieved a microorganism hit rate of 92%, whereas for conventional, it is a rate of only 72%. It has also been used in CSCR. It has been used in neovascular ARMD. OCT angio guided Navilas is there. For this, the vascular trunk in the proximal part, laser were put. It is difficult to put it, to laser this area manually because it is very close to fovea. So the last topic is targeted retinal photocoagulation. It's a new school of thought. So it is said that in PDR, there is no need to treat the complete retina. You can only treat the CNP areas on FFA. So this will be possible in less laser marks. And second is in CME secondary to DME or RVO, the CME tends to recur even after repeated intravascular injections. So it is thought that peripheral CNP areas is a source of continuous VEGF. So if we treat this area, so the recurrence will be decreased. So this is a case of PRP. The conventional teaching is that we have to come 2 disc diameter posterior to the fovea. So this will give a lot of posterior field, the posterior field defect. But in this case, CNP areas are quite anterior. So if we treat only the CNP areas, we can protect the posterior field of vision. It has been used for PRP. it is equally effective and less destructive to the posterior retina. In DME, it was thought that if we treat the CNP areas also, the need for anti-VEGF injections will decrease. However, the 3-year randomized DAVE trial proved that the combination therapy with ranibizumab and TRP did not show to improve the visual outcome or decrease the burden of injections compared to ranibizumab alone. It was also tried in RBO, the RELATE trial, and showed that the long-term benefit in BCVA resolution of edema or number of injections required was not less when laser was added to ranibizumab. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Piyush. Very lucid presentation and with nice animations and videos. So with this, we'll next move on to the next topic by Dr. Obuli. Step-by-step guide for the beginners and what are the possible complications and how to manage the complications. So this topic is particularly very important for those who are going to learn doing the retinal lasers, the PGs and the fellows. So it's one of the most important topics. Over to you, Dr. Obuli. Your slides are visible. Your audio is not yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Amit. Yeah. My topic given for today is beginner's guide, possible complications and management. Myself, Dr. Obuli Ramachandran. I would like to first thank Dr. Amit and AS for giving me this opportunity. I would also like to thank Dr. Karthik Kumar and Gautam Kumar for the pictures and inputs. Well done laser is a thing of beauty. As a beginner, we all aspire to do good laser. So in my topic, I will be mainly covering as a beginner, what are all the things which you should keep in mind while doing the laser. These are the topics from my presentation. First thing is knowing your machine. As a beginner, it's very important that you should know your machine. What are the settings, how to change it, what is the emergency stop button, how to fiddle with it. So as a beginner, you should spend endless time fiddling with the machine and identifying all the ways we can do it more efficiently. The first thing is Pascal. Pascal is the high-end machine. It has a completely touchscreen based system. On the top left is the status button, which is used to switch on or switch off the laser. The top rows show the power and exposure. This is the spot diameter and this is the spacing. The lens also can be selected by which it shows the amount of time the magnification of the spot happens over the retina. Now coming on to iRedex. iRedex is a partially knob and partially touchscreen based system. On the top right, you can see the most important button. This, when it is amber in color, it means the machine is switched off, and when it is green in color, it is switched on. And the three knobs are for the duration, power, and interval. And this micropulse is should be switched on when the micropulse mode is going on. Once the micropulse is switched on, you will see two different distinct things. One is that the power will be yellow in color, and then there will be a yellow band which will show the duty cycle. So this should be kept in mind, because if you don't switch on and sometimes you start it, it will lead to disastrous consequences. Now coming on to the most commonly available laser which is there in everywhere, it is RO laser. RO laser is predominantly a touch screen. There has no touch screen. It is a knob based machine. There are multiple buttons which you have to click to select each module, and then the knob is used to adjust the thing. The other two lasers are Zeiss, Visualux. This has a touch screen, and you can use it for either LIO or for slit lamp based delivery. And then there is a Apasami Amog laser, which is also a multi-spot based 532 nanometer laser. Now coming on to lenses, I will be discussing the two most common lenses you will be using as a beginner. The first one is Mainstar. Mainstar has a static field of 165, a dynamic field of 180 degrees. The image magnification is 0.5 times. And the most important thing as a beginner to keep in mind is your laser spot will be magnified by this lens by 1.96 times. That means it will be twice the size of what is shown in the machine. And the second one is the Volk area centralis. It has a static field of 70 degree, a dynamic field of 84 degree. The image magnification is 1.06 and the magnifies the laser spot by 0.94, which means more or less whatever you laser, that will be the spot size in the retina. The most important thing as a beginner you should keep in mind is the proper posture and armrest. So as a beginner, when you are learning your skills in an institution, you are expected to handle a lot more cases. So it's very imperative for you to ensure that you have a proper posture, so that you will not be putting more stress on your body, and you will be able to do multiple lasers. So this is our institute where we will be showing 3 areas which you should focus when you are a beginner. The first thing is your chair. Your chair should always be adjustable, and you should adjust it to your comfortable position. The second thing is the height of the table. So this can, every table, laser table has a button by which you can raise or lower the table. So and the third thing is your armrest. So these 3 things, once you do, your stress on the lower back and your shoulder considerably reduces, and you can do lasers much more comfortably and for a longer period of time. Now in the time of corona pandemic, I think the most important thing everyone should keep in mind is a laser is a procedure where the doctor and the patient sit opposite to each other, and there is a high risk of transmission of the virus. So as a rule, it's always safe to ensure that the patient is wearing the mask. And once you wear the mask and you do laser, you can notice that there will be a lot of fogging because of the outbreathing of the patient. So to prevent that, it is better to plaster the mask over the nose and then continue that laser so that the fogging will not happen and you will be feeling a little more safer. Now coming on to machine settings, if you're doing a Pascal, I think it's better to start with small boxes like 3x3 boxes rather than directly going for 5x5, because you will not be understanding as to how wide the laser marks are on the retina. And then the power initially, if your lens is clear or if a sort of a patient, you can start with the powers from 250 to 275 and the exposure time of 20 to 30 seconds. And most important thing to be kept in mind is in a Pascal laser, the spot does not expand over a period of time. So the spacing can be kept at 0.5 instead of the traditional 1 spot width, which is described in the textbooks. Now coming on to the dilemma between single spot and multi-spot. As a beginner, if you're given the choice, you will always feel like going towards multi-spot since it is more novel. But there are only certain indications as a beginner, it will be useful to do multi-spot. Like if a patient has clear lens or a pseudophakic patient, and it is a simple case like a PDR where you are doing 2 to 3 sittings. It is not recommended if the patient is having a relatively hazy media like a cataract, or if the patient is having vitreous hemorrhage where you have to do accessible PRP, or you have to do fill-in PRP, where a single spot is much more useful and recommended. And also things to keep in mind is a 0.5 spot size gap in multi-spot. And multi-spot laser is relatively quicker, but more expertise is needed. Now coming on to LIO, as a beginner, the most dreaded thing everyone will feel is LIO, because it needs for the doctor to balance multiple things like the LIO on your head, the 20D, and the patient's position. So the most important thing to do before you do LIO is to do extensive indirect ophthalmoscopy and indentation in OPD, and first make yourself accustomed to seeing aura and to indent all quadrants before you start doing LIO. Because if you directly do LIO, then it will become all the more difficult to first focus the lens, laser rays, and to indent. So first you indent, you practice indentation in the OPD. And then when you come to the LIO room, make sure that the table is of the right height. If your table is adjustable, then it is all the more useful. If your table is not adjustable, it will lead to backache, because you will be bending forward and backward to ensure your laser marks are focused on the retina. Make sure the patient is supine position, comfortable. All the quadrants are examined similar to an IO examination. And keep in mind that the spot size on the retina is variable. It depends on the distance between the examiner side and the patient side, the refractive status of the patient. The most common lenses used are 20D and 30D lenses. Now coming on to tackling a cataractous lens. When you are in an institute setup, you should keep in mind that the person advising the laser and person performing the laser are 2 different people. So as a beginner, it's always imperative that you should do a proper slit lamp examination to look for the cataract in the eye which you're going to laser, and then prepare yourself mentally before you start doing the laser. It's always advised to avoid multi-spot laser in a cataractous lens, because more power is multi-spot laser generally means higher power, and if the lens is cataractous, then more absorption of the power, laser will happen in the lens. Also, yellow laser is recommended for cataractous lenses like amber and brown cataracts, because in an amber and brown cataract, the green is a complementary color, and hence more absorption of the laser happens, and which leads to lens burn. The 2 most important things as a beginner to keep in mind is do not keep increasing the power if the desired grain of burn is not achieved. And also sometimes there is no shame in accepting that a cataract surgery is always required before doing a PRP. The cases you should choose as a beginner, one is early PDR with no fibrous proliferation, clear lens and a pseudophakic patient. In case of RVO, old RVO with NVE and there is no fibrous proliferation, and also a lattice with a hole in periphery with a clear lens. Now coming on to laser marking, when you are doing as a beginner, there will be a lot of things going on in your mind about the power, about keeping your arms in the correct position, focusing. So sometimes you will forget that the image, what you are seeing is inverted. So it's there is always no shame in asking for a senior to mark the retina, the area to be lasered prior to lasering, because that will help you ease the burden of trying to take care of the macula. Because you will be sure that you only need to laser the areas anterior to the area which is marked. So this is how you see your retina. For example, this is a right eye where the inferior inferior half is marked. You will see it exactly inverted, like a superior part and a left eye. So you should always keep mark it so that will ensure that you will be doing only anterior to it. Now coming on to RETI. RETI is a useful instrument if available. It is a clamp-based instrument which can be fitted in any laser, and you can use any non-contact lenses to first get an orientation as to how the retina is viewed when you see through the lens, and also you can use it to practice patterns of single spot in case of before starting on a human eye. Now coming on to laser safety, as a beginner, it's sometimes you will be only focusing on the patient's eye. It's always important to ensure that all the other people inside your room are also safeguarded, and it's imperative to ensure that all the sisters or the assistants who are helping you is wearing the proper glasses to protect them from the laser. So these are the different types of safety glasses. The orange one is for the 532 nanometer, the black one is for 810 nanometer, and these two purple ones are for the 577 nanometer laser. Signs of good PRP, there are early and late signs of good PRP. The early sign of good PRP is that there all the anatomical boundaries are respected, like 0.5 mm nasal to the disc and 2.5 disc diameter temporal to the macula around the arcades, and there is one spot width apart, and there is uniform burn intensity everywhere. And the late signs of good PRP are regression of new vessels, absorption of retinal hemorrhages, decrease in venous dilatation, and disc pallor. Now, what are the don'ts to do in laser? Never coagulate any normal vessel, never superimpose your laser spots, never laser over intraretinal hemorrhages, always leave 2 to 3 disc diameter gap between the margins of the traction and the FPs if you're doing in a case with PDR with fibrous proliferation. Now coming on to complications and managements. The most common complication is high-grade laser burns. This happens when you forget that actually the retina keeps thinning as you go from the posterior pole towards the periphery. So your laser power should always be titrated as you go away more and more away from the macula. If you don't titrate, it will lead to grade 4+ burns, which over a period of time expand and coalesce to give some ugly patterns. So always keep in mind to keep reducing your power as you go towards the periphery. And the next common dreaded complication is lens burn. If a lens burn happens, the most important thing is which you will notice immediately is increasing the haziness in your media. And also, the only solution right now is to go for a cataract surgery. And it's when you're referring the patient to your arterial segment friend, you should ensure that you tell him that the lens burn happened, so that intraoperatively he might be anticipating a posterior capsule rupture. Now coming on to the most dreaded complication, which is inverted macular burn. This is like the worst complication that can happen as a beginner. The first thing is do not panic. The second thing is this is a coagulative necrosis process. So your aim should be to halt this process as soon as possible. So you should pump the patient with steroids like oral steroid or IV steroid. And if you are going for IVMP, the bolus dose of 30 mg per kg and a maintenance dose of 5.4 mg per kg per hour is recommended. Other supplementary therapies like antioxidants, vitamins, and vasodilators. Other experimental drugs which have been tried are MK801, HFGF, and deferoxamine. Now coming on to progression of TRD. When such a patient comes to you in the OPD for laser, no matter what you do, the TRD is going to progress. So the only thing which you need to keep in mind is be very conservative in your laser. At least have 2 to 3 disc diameter away from the margins of the traction, and give very mild light burns, and do it in multiple settings. If in case this case progresses to have a macula of TRD, then you can go ahead with surgery. If in case a vitreous hemorrhage happens after doing a laser, you can wait for 1 month for the vitreous hemorrhage to resolve. If the vitreous hemorrhage resolves, you can again go ahead to do further PRP. If the vitreous hemorrhage doesn't resolve, then you can again go ahead with surgery. And finally, coming on to choroidal detachment and exudative RD, this happens mostly in patients who have uncontrolled sugar, or who are the patients who have been having diabetic uremia, where the urea and creatinine are very high. So it is all as a beginner, it is always very important to note down the patient's urea and creatinine every sitting before you do the laser. And also, sometimes when the patient is advised in 2 sittings, you as a laser surgeon, you have to decide as to how many sittings based on the patient's uremic control. And if in case such a choroidal detachment happens, it is mostly exudative in nature. It will be self-limiting most of the times. You keep the patient under close monitoring, and start the patient on topical steroids. Once the choroidal detachment resolves, after a month, you can again proceed with the further PRP. Now, coming on to common mistakes, there are 2 most common mistakes which are there. One is when you are doing it as a beginner in sometimes you will forget that the pattern is actually shouldn't be done very close to the macula, so that there will be at some places it will be far away from the macula, and some places it will be very close to the macula. Another error in this is that the doctor has not titrated the laser as he has gone away from the macula. Hence, there are grade 4+ burns in the periphery and grade 2 burns near the macula. The second most common mistake is leaving gap areas in the periphery. When you leave skip areas in the periphery, on the follow-up, that will lead to recurrent vitreous hemorrhages or even neovascularization iris. So it is always, as a beginner, it's always imperative to laser till the periphery, and also not to leave such wide areas around the disc. It should be always 0.5 mm, 0.5 disc diameter temporal to the macula, and also up to the arcades, at least hugging the arcades. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Obuli. You have covered almost all aspects for a laser beginner. And as I mentioned, this is the most important topic. So we took the liberty of extending your talk by 2 minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
thank you.
And that was the last talk. So as Dr. Obuli had mentioned, as the beginner, you should know our machines and the lenses. That is the most important thing. And also one more aspect he has touched upon, that is marking by some, when you are learning, some senior can mark the extent you want to laser, so that you are don't have any tension when you are doing the laser, whether you're going inside the macular area or not. So I'd like to thank and congratulate all the speakers. We have completed well in time, and we have some 10 minutes, I think, for our discussion. Madam, do you have any question answers, this thing in the query box? Questions?
So far, there are no questions, sir.
Okay, okay.
Then were there, but they are answered already.
Okay, and then so we have some questions. I have some questions which we can have 10 minutes, right, madam?
Sure, sir. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm just the other co-instructors. I can just ask them. So this is for Dr. Chittaranjan. You already have mentioned that different centers have different protocol they follow for laser in refractive surgeries, for retinal laser prior to refractive surgeries. So the textbook indications are like symptomatic retinal holes. But suppose a patient comes with almost 360 of lattice, but until your initial examination, you have not seen any single break. So that patient, do you do laser, or that also do you observe?
So nice question, Dr. Amit. Actually, this is a gray zone, as I have told in the speech also. Some schools of thought is that you should do laser even if there is a single lattice without any hole, without any symptom also. If the patient is planned for LASIK surgery or refractive surgery, corneal refractive surgery, they do laser barrage. Some centers they don't do. In our center, we don't do them aggressively. Okay, so we follow the indications of the traditional indications if it is symptomatic. But as you told, 360 lattices are there. Probably in that case, specifically, we may think of doing a barrage laser if the patient is planned for LASIK surgery. In that
all extensive lattices, we can go ahead and try to do the laser. So it will be useful for the cornea surgeon also. They will also be relaxed. Yeah. Dr. Akshay, you want to add on something?
Sir, I also want to ask Dr. Chittaranjan some question. So, Dr. Chittaranjan, how posterior do we laser for ROP?
Posterior till the aura. Actually,
anterior, posterior.
Posterior, anterior to the aura, posteriorly till the junction of the avascular and vascular retina. In fact, you can go 1 or 2 rows inside the retina, also the vascular retina, you can go posteriorly. Sorry, I answered your anterior.
Okay.
So one more point I want to add in this. So you go as close to the
for ROP laser. How many spots and sittings do we usually go for?
Which one? ROP.
ROP laser.
I'll answer. Yeah. So for ROP, usually we'll go for both eyes. You can do in the same sitting, but we have to look for the systemic condition of the child. So one eye we try to complete first, and if there is not extensive laser to be done, suppose only peripheral zone 2 is involved, then we plan to finish it in the same sitting in both the eyes. And if any time during the laser, we have to monitor the heart rate and the SpO2. So what I do is I'll put a SpO2 probe and a heart rate, and a pediatrician from the neonatology will be there besides. So always we monitor the systemic condition of the child. Anytime you see the heart rate going above 150 or SpO2 coming below 90, we stop momentarily. And if this keeps on happening multiple times during the laser sitting, we stop and schedule the laser for the next day. However, if everything goes on fine, we try to do at least some laser in both the eyes, so that and other sitting after 5 to 7 days, we do the next sitting if needed.
Sir, what if we are going towards the ridge or slightly posterior to ridge? It does not cause exacerbate the fibroretinal tract?
No, in ROP we go close to the ridge. So that is one difference from diabetic laser.
It's not like DR.
Yes.
It's the fibrovascular membrane will melt off.
Yes. And I have one question for Dr. Piyush. So what about single sitting laser if you are doing in a Pascal or Nebulas? Is that advisable? Can you do?
So we can do. Studies have shown that if we do, there's no.
Dr. Chittaranjan, you can mute, or you can come here, Dr. Piyush.
So studies have been done. They have shown that even if you do 1 sitting laser or 4 sitting laser, there's no increase in pain. There's no increase in CME, no increase in inflammation. But obviously, these are the eyes that do not have any FPs. So if FPs are there, it is advisable to divide your laser into 2 or 3 sittings, as like Obli has shown. The FP can exacerbate and go into TRDs. And in case of small eyes, you can have choroidal detachments.
Dr. Piyush, one thing. So usually we need more spots per eye in Pascal laser compared to regular single spot laser.
Yes, because they expand less. So we have to give more spots.
What is the number? Is there any specific number?
They say around 3,000.
Okay. I have one more question for Dr. Chittaranjan. Okay. So I have one question for Dr. Obuli.
Yeah.
Thing is, any other alternative model for this thing? No, Reti eye. Why do you get it as a PG or this thing? If you want
I think the Reti eye which we are using is available in Aurolab. Aurolab website, you can go and you can order that, and it will be delivered to your address. And apart from that, there are other models, but I am not sure. But Aurolab one is the most widely used one. It has a clamp and it is used. It can be used to in any setting.
Thank you. Yeah. So that is important. Where do you get it from to know? And also, I would like to point out there is one study also, not a study, one new instrument published in Retina is RetiLab. It's do it yourself. So you can, the PGs or the fellows who are listening can follow that article, and you can actually make it at your home with filter papers and with a ping pong plastic ball, and then use electric boards and other panels to make it yourself at home. And last question I have, anything you want to add on, Dr. Abuli?
No, there is a recent paper by Dr. Saurav Damodaran also in this thing, which shows how to make it in your home itself.
So that's important. Once you get it easily, if you can do it yourself, then it becomes, the learning also becomes easy.
Sir, one
more question I have.
Chittaranjan sir, I have. Is if we are, it's a posterior APROP and we are injecting anti-VEGF injections, how long do we wait for doing laser later on?
So basically, after giving injection in APROP, you follow it for weekly for around 1 month. You see if there is the vessels are growing nicely, then you may escape without that also. But if there is recurrence or if there is signs are still there, if there is no regression, in that case you have to do. So it is a customized
clinical.
Yes, it's customized. You have to follow up and then you have to decide. Yes.
So one last question I have for Dr. Chittaranjan. Again, for the beginners, it must be important. So in CSCR, when you do the focal laser, we see the retinal image or the FF image, the leak, you told 375 microns away from the center of the macula, that is from the fovea, you can do normal conventional focal laser. So when we shift to the laser machine, we don't have that FA picture. So how do you trace that leaking point?
Roughly
while doing a
around
focal laser?
3 to 4 times of the thickness of the retinal vein, that is 120 micron around. So 3 to 4 times the thickness of that you can measure it in the laser slit beam or something. So this is I told you from a review article, recent review article, that is 375. So that is the kind of parameter which you can use roughly 3 to 4 times of the.
So one more thing, I can identify some small vessels which are macula going towards the fovea. So you can try to trace the leak in FFA, identify one small vessel, and once shifting into the slit lamp for laser, we can identify that vessel and go along the vessel, and how far from the arcade is the leak, we can trace along the vessel. So that
yes,
point
that is also one method.
And also you have to have the image of the leak FFA readily available with us in our mobile phone.
Yes.
Dr. Chittaranjan,
so that anytime doubt we can have a look at it, because we don't have the comfort of having a nebulous where you can overlap.
Yes, Akshay, you want to tell something?
Sir, I want to ask you, you have mentioned Dr. Shukla's paper. Is it only for subfoveal CSR or also regular non-subfoveal?
No, they have done subfoveal CSR. So that is a kind of subthreshold TTT for CSR. That is the largest series available till date, and they have done for subfoveal leaks.
Okay. And the spot size was?
Spot size 0.5. 0.5. I showed you that image you saw, no? That the point, yes, the dialer in the dialer. 0.5.
Any other questions, madam, we have from the audience or the panelists?
No, sir. As of now, I cannot see any.
Okay. Then shall we call it a end of the session, madam? I think we have.
Sure, sir. Yes. If there is something that you have to discuss, we can even have more 5 minutes for it, because we have time in hand. Any
of the panelists, co-instructors, anything you would like to discuss, which you could not cover in your topic?
Again, Dr. Chittaranjan sir, is that he showed one CSR with the PED. There was a intraretinal fluid present in that OCT image. Can we go back to that slide, or?
I have to share that, but you tell me the first one or the repeat one?
No, the first one.
First one. So
there was one PED, and there was some intraretinal fluid also present in that.
No, that was subretinal. PED and subretinal fluid. That was a fibrinous deposit actually. So one ring fibrin deposit was there.
Okay.
Chronic cases you can get intraretinal fluid. Acute, that was an acute case. So acute cases, intraretinal fluid is very rare. And that was not a PED. That was not a PCB case. That was a CSR. In PCB case, sometimes you will get a sub-RP, that fibrinous ring separated lesion. Now this without ICG you can diagnose with the OCT, that criteria is there. No? There you can get. But this was a purely CSR case only. But
I thought I saw some fluid in the OCT. Intraretinal fluid was seen. I think, but it's okay.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Okay. With this, I would like to thank again all the speakers and for this wonderful session. And I would also like to thank the hall moderator and the AV team of AIOS for giving us this opportunity and organizing this session wonderfully. Thank you all. So with that, we can leave the session. Yes, thank you.
Thank you everyone. Thank you.
All attendees enjoyed our session.
Yes.
I hope there is some prize for finishing it on time.